So as Hai shared, my name is Michelle Sarche. I am at the University of Colorado, Anschutz Medical Campus, and that's in Aurora, Colorado. I'm in the Centers for American Indian and Alaska Native Health there. And I'm here to share a little bit with you today about adversity and resilience in American Indian and Alaska Native community contexts. So my goals are to provide an overview of the American Indian and Alaska Native population, to describe sources of adversity within contemporary and historical contexts, discuss the foundational role of culture and language in fostering health and resilience, and share the Indigenous Connectedness Framework as a way forward for supporting children's development. So there are 573 federally recognized American Indian and Alaska Native tribes in the U.S. 231 of those are in Alaska, and 342 are in the lower 48 United States, including on reservations, off-reservation trust lands, and in tribal statistical areas, such as much of the tribal land here in Oklahoma. If you were to access this 2010 US Census map, these are areas represented in green, light blue, and orange. So you can see a lot of the green areas are really west of the Mississippi. There are an additional 63 state-recognized tribes, and those are areas that are in dark blue and purple, which are hard to see here, but are in 11 states, primarily on the East Coast area. In 2010, there were 5.2 million American Indian and Alaska Native people. This included just under half who were American Indian or Alaska Native alone, and just over half who were American Indian or Alaska Native in combination with another race. And together, these two groups of American Indian and Alaska Native people make up about 1.7% of the total US population. The majority of American Indian and Alaska Native people live outside of tribal lands, so not on reservations or reservation trust lands or tribal statistical areas. And so that differs a little bit for those different groups. For all American Indian and Alaska Natives, 78% live off of tribal lands. For those who are American Indian or Alaska Native alone, 67% do. And for those who are American Indian or Alaska Native in combination with another race, 92% of them live off of tribal lands. And among those living outside of tribal lands, 71% live in cities. So the vast majority of the American Indian and Alaska Native population actually lives in cities in the US. Cities with the greatest number of American Indian and Alaska Native people include New York, LA, Phoenix, Oklahoma City, Anchorage, Tulsa, and so on. And cities with the greatest percent, the largest concentrations of American Indian and Alaska Native people are, and these are in order, Anchorage, Tulsa, Norman, Oklahoma City, Billings, Albuquerque, and so on. And so here in Oklahoma, you have cities in the top 10 of both lists. American Indian and Alaska Native people are disproportionately affected by a number of adversities. This is a narrative that you are likely familiar with. As a whole, American Indian and Alaska Native populations are disproportionately affected by violence, including greater rates of child abuse and neglect, early childhood adversity, violence against women, and violent victimization, including homicide. Oops, sorry, I went the wrong way. I knew that would happen. Sorry. Okay. And by mental health concerns, including greater rates of past-year mental illness, serious psychological distress in the last 30 days, depression among children and adolescents, and suicide, including among youth. And by substance abuse. Although they are less likely to drink as a whole, they are more likely to engage in risky patterns of use, including binge drinking. There are greater rates of alcohol-related deaths, including from chronic liver disease and cirrhosis. And among adolescents, a greater likelihood of early initiation of use, and riskier patterns of use early on. But these adversities reflect failures of systems. Despite treaty and trust obligations, service systems and community resources are under-resourced and fall short of meeting the needs of tribal citizens with respect to education, healthcare, law enforcement, housing, and economic well-being. These are the adverse community environments depicted in the Pair of Aces tree. But the roots are even deeper. These adversities also reflect the cascading consequences of massively traumatic and orchestrated historic events and ongoing assaults. Since the time of first contact, American Indians and Alaska Natives have endured assaults. Their lives, land, children, and identities have been taken, and these continue. Despite these efforts to take, American Indian and Alaska Native communities have fiercely held on. And in the face of these historical and contemporary threats, tribal beliefs, practices, and language have endured. So alongside the challenges they face, American Indian and Alaska Native communities are also flourishing. For example, among a sample of 218 adults with type 2 diabetes, Kading et al. Found that 51% of the sample were in flourishing positive mental health. And this was positively associated with participation in traditional cultural activities. So despite their diversity across all communities, Native language and culture are embraced as foundational to health. Resilience and flourishing are built into Native language and culture. For children in particular, they provide a sense of identity and belonging, reveal expectations for behavior that align with cultural norms, and offer protection and guidance along the way to adulthood. For example, children are viewed as sacred gifts from the Creator. The Lakota word for child, wakaija, translates literally into sacred little one. Children grow up with a strong sense of belonging and place. They are raised in extended family environments, and they are connected to their tribal land, which is sacred, ancestral, and part of their tribal creation stories. Children are commonly taught the value of respect, humility, and learning through quiet observation. As we look forward, the Indigenous Connectedness Framework offers guidance. It was published this year by a friend and colleague, Jessica Ulrich. She's an Inupiaq woman, mother, social worker, and child welfare worker. This was a qualitative content analysis of 65 books, articles, and dissertations that she undertook. And in her words, the hours spent studying this topic were for the love of our children. And when it comes to Native communities, and I know all communities share in this sentiment, there is nothing more personal, precious, or sacred than their children. So I'm just going to walk you through very briefly what the Indigenous Connectedness Framework is. In the outer 4 quadrants are the 4 spheres where connectedness manifests, i.e., to the environment, the community, family, and intergenerationally, meaning both to both past and future generations. The purple outer circle includes the mechanisms by which connectedness is built. So through togetherness, mentoring, dancing, humor, art, stories, sharing ceremonies, historical knowledge, roles, names, love, elder leadership, subsistence practices, language, and togetherness. The green inner circle represents what happens when connectedness happens, i.e., when the false separations between the self and the other fall away to build spiritual connectedness and collective well-being. At its center is child well-being. And when child well-being is achieved, the bidirectional arrows show that so too is the well-being of all, past, present, and future. So I offer this to you in your work, in your states, in your counties, in your cities, in your communities, in your universities, wherever your sphere of influence is, to listen to Indigenous voices in all communities. Embrace Indigenous worldviews and models like the Indigenous Connectedness Framework for supporting health and building resilience, not only in Indigenous communities, but all communities. And use these models to inform your theory of change, your intervention or program elements, and the constructs and how you choose to measure them. And work to support the career development of Native scholars. We need more. There is so much work to do, and they hold the key. Oops, sorry.